Have you ever wondered where the problems in the world today would exist if we had deeper connection to ourselves, others, and the environment and acted from that place? Welcome to the Conscious Action Podcast with your host, Brian Berneman, who believe that connection is the key to taking conscious action as individuals and creating a better world. We are here to raise awareness and inspire meaningful action by sharing stories, knowledge, and conversations with thought leaders and change makers. From sustainability to well-being and everything related to conscious living, our mission is to empower you to be the change that you want to see in the world.
Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Conscious Action Podcast. I am Brian Berneman, your host, and I have the pleasure to be joined all the way from Sydney, Australia by Rosemary Gattuso. Thank you so much, Rosemary, for being here and for connecting again and to be able to have a nice, wonderful, potentially valuable conversation between us, but as well for everybody that is listening and watching us. So for everybody that is here with us, what can you share about you and your path so far before we get into the topics that I want to explore?
Sure. Thanks, Brian. I'm really looking forward to today. And I guess, I'm sitting here really having started with a legal background and now sitting here as a writer, a self-improvement, self-help writer. So it's been a bit of a journey for me. And I guess what always jumps out with me is that I was pursuing what I thought I wanted or where I thought I needed to be, and then just was given evidence that it wasn't for me. But through getting to what was not for me, I got to where I am now. So it's all been quite valuable. Started as, always wanted to be a family lawyer. Then as soon as I started studying, I thought, this is not for me. This doesn't suit my personality. This really highlights my weaknesses. And it was, I guess not very healthy as well for me to be in a place where I just felt some kind of deficit in me because it just wasn't working for me. But I still stayed there. I still finished and, completed all my studies and actually ended up doing a master's in it as well. But it was in doing that in the very last 6 months of my undergraduate training, there was a compulsory mediation component. And it was the first time I felt that there's something that resonated with me and also highlighted my strengths more. And it was something I was really drawn to, whereas everyone else in the class thought it was a waste of time and they hated it, So it was quite interesting. And from then on, I was really interested in what was called alternative dispute resolution, because it was alternative to legal and judicial and going through an adversarial approach and the court system. And I guess, I went from working in complaints handling and actually negotiating as well, to then family mediation. It took me a while to get there, I guess, but I got there. And then once there, I realized that there was a lot of sort of missing gaps around human behavior and why people respond to certain ways. So that got me then looking into exploring my own personal development, as well as studying in areas of trauma and child development and family dynamics. So then that led me to becoming a counsellor, a family counsellor and a couples counsellor, and then exploring more, the neuroscience and anything related to human behavior, which then led to my book. But it's all layer upon layer based on, because as a mediator, I saw how people handled adversity. And then I tried to link it in with what I was learning about trauma and child development and neuroscience.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing all of that. Rosemary, I think a lot of times it's easy sometimes to look back at, as you were sharing your journey, but sometimes in the moment, of course, you don't know what you're doing or you're not sure. And I have found a lot of times through the years that when we're able to actually look back, we see that everything was there for a reason, as you were sharing, like your foundation on law and your foundation on that type of work led you to finding this, and then you're able to marry all of these different perspectives and to support people with all of that background, which if you hadn't done that, then you wouldn't be able to do what you're doing today. And I
Mm.
think that a lot of times when we're able to allow ourselves the the compassion to understand, like everything is there for a purpose. And it's allowing us to build either capabilities or skills or just learnings, insights, whatever that is, to be able to go into the next stages of our life, whatever that looks like. So yeah, I think that's wonderful. And I wanted to start digging a little bit in your experience in terms of when you were doing like more of the, let's call it the judicial, like family disputes or things like that. What were some of the things that you were noticing that led you to that understanding, like, there's different perspectives and understanding more the behavior and understanding more trauma that might be helpful. But what were some of the things that you were noticing that led you to that?
Mm. Well, I guess it wasn't a very user-friendly situation or system. And it was more about, the individual approach. It's, me versus you. And it didn't really give the bigger picture. And particularly when you're working with families, it's always about the bigger picture because you have children who are more vulnerable and are dependent on the adults. So it almost, I mean, the legislation is all about the children and the what the children need, but the process wasn't really, and it also wasn't very trauma informed.
Mm.
It was just focusing on that situation at that moment in time with the evidence that they're bringing forward. And so there were a lot of imbalances. Maybe one didn't have a legal representation or didn't have the best legal representation, or one had a mental health issue or some kind of addiction or anything that would just put them in a bad light in that traditional situation. Whereas mediation, it's more open. I mean, it still focuses on safety and making sure that the children are safe in all situations, but it's more flexible and more open to situations because, families work very differently and have very different systems, and what's acceptable in one is not always acceptable in another, but it works because of the dynamics. But the legal system doesn't really factor that in.
Mm. Mm. Interesting. Yeah, for me, a lot of times with how I learned and how I work as well with some of the perspectives that you're mentioning in terms of family dynamics and trauma, there's so much that I see that majority of the time as society, we are not taking into consideration, that we are not exploring really the different layers of what it means to be a human, what it means to have trauma, what it means to be able to have different dynamics and to allow everything to be in the context of that, and to be able to also find common points, or to be able to heal different situations through understanding, instead of, I think that potentially what you were mentioning before, like just competing me against you and trying
Yeah.
to, like get whatever I want and stuff, trying to figure out what's the best for everyone in any given situation. Mm.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And it's really that I see it as the lens that really focuses on the individual as opposed to the community or the family or the group. And that can also, um, raise conflicts of interest, actually. And that's what it is. It's a series of conflicts of interest in the traditional sort of legal system, and it's definitely not trauma informed.
Mm. Are you able to share, I don't know if there's confidentiality here, but are you able to share some different work that you have done through the years that you were able to actually get everybody to explore things in a different way, mediating and using all of these different lenses? If you're able to share any examples of that, like what were the issues and how they were explored?
Yeah. I think I can give maybe a general sort of approach that I use. So in all cases, unless there's an indication not to, I would start the mediation before any of the negotiations, before, things start getting deeper into the conversation, break it down into talking about the children, assuming there's, it's a mediation with children. And what I would do is I would get each parent, or both of them together, to describe their child one at a time. And so sometimes there are differences because each parent has a different experience with the child, because, we're different with one person than we are with another, and our parents are no different. And sometimes they're very similar, and sometimes it's very challenging to have that conversation as well, because, mediation, it's really about two people coming together in a room, or could be virtually, or it could even be in separate rooms, but coming together to talk about, the most important, scenario for them, which is their family, their children. And in some cases, it's the first time they've been in the room together for more than 5 minutes at, dropping off the kids. So that in itself can be challenging. So sometimes just getting through that. And I guess just to give that perspective, because as a mediator, my role is not to judge or to take sides or to give an opinion. It's really to help facilitate the conversation. And I am, there to be neutral. And I say to them, I'm not here to judge. So in bringing these parents together to say, tell me about your children, what's he like, what's she like, what does she do, what's she good at, where does she need extra support? Sometimes even just having that conversation can help, both parents realize, actually, we are here for the same reason. And then, once that, and I would do it, typically I would have a whiteboard or on a piece of paper, whatever's more, one column about the children, and then the next column, well, for each child, and then the next column would be about, then what do they need from mum and dad? Or what do they need from their parents, from their carers, whoever it is? And then draw in on, well, you've said that he's a little bit sensitive. You've said that he's very aware of his surroundings. You've said that he's got some social issues. You've said that he's really gifted, or she's really, and then sort of link that in. And sometimes having that conversation, and it's all on their terms, because, I've got no interest, really. They're not, it's not my family. It's not, I'm there to facilitate the conversation and help them stay on track and stay focused. So it's more about what is relevant for them and what needs to come up for them, because it'll go where they need to be, if that makes sense. So sometimes just having that dialogue, just sitting down and saying, actually, this is what our children are like. Well, this is what our daughter is like. And we need, how can we work together? So it's more about, and I guess I go again from that lens of, from the individual approach to the family approach. I know it's a very general, but it's a practice that I would routinely use in every session.
Mm. And is that as part of your process, is the process potentially as well like for them to be able to heal, or there's, like already the conflict and that's not something that you would explore?
Look, it can be. I guess my dilemma is that I've got a very short period of time, and it's really specific. The goal is to help them sort out their parenting, what they need to do. So
Mm.
if they need to start the dialogue about healing, it'll come up.
Mm.
And so, and sometimes it could be just spending time, back and forth about the relationship, about a situation. So it can sort of deviate a bit into a therapeutic approach. And I guess my role as the mediator is to really balance how long to keep them there, or when to say, how about you continue this in a therapeutic setting?
Mm.
But there's definitely, because healing doesn't have to be going to a therapist. Healing can be hearing something for the first time, or being ready to hear it for the first time, or saying it, or just sitting in the room and being acknowledged.
Mm. Yeah,
Because
definitely.
part of the way that I work is quite strengths based, and so it's about rewriting the narrative as well,
Mm.
because I'm the witness. So I can be in a room where there's a lot of criticism, and criticism has been the norm, and that's what's been focused on. And then I can sort of say, well, there has been criticism, but what about times when there has been respect?
Mm.
And how can you work on that in the future and learn from that criticism?
Yeah. Are you able to share, like, because I think that this is a really important aspect, and I see it a lot. I was actually last week when I was teaching at university a class, and one of my students mentioned something about someone saying something negative, which might be that, like what part of what you were sharing. And I told him, well, there is a reason why most of the time we criticize or we complain, or that's what's pointed out, because the what has been normalized is to only point out those things and not the positives. This is why most of the time the news, if someone watches the news, it's mostly negative stuff, and it's not the news of mom and dad came back home today and they made a beautiful meal and the family ate together. Wonderful. It's like that's not on the news. What's on the news is the conflicts and the wars and all of the different things that are taking place that might have a negative lens. And it's like, okay, there's a reason why we're doing that. And as well, there's all of these other positive things, which is what you're talking about, that strength-based perspective or approach. Can you share a little bit more about, for you or for anybody that is listening, what is that approach, and how would they start to implement it in their lives?
Yeah.
Especially, like if they are not in a mediation, it can be for anyone.
Yeah. And look, I talk about my work as a mediator, but it's really gave me an opportunity to see people managing their adversity. And so that's where I was able to see the trends and see myself in their situation and see different ways to handle the same scenario. So, and I also, I guess I worked in an organization that was very strengths-based. So it was in my face, and it had a positive impact on me because I was shown my strengths, and that helped me to grow and to be able to see more of the strengths in others and use that in my work. And so essentially the way um, the way that I talk about strengths-based is I, refer to the theory that really categorizes all thoughts, feelings, and actions as coming under what's wrong or what's strong. And so, you watch the news, you see what's wrong. you have a conversation, often what's wrong comes up. And, it's for some have a stronger default to the what's wrong path. Some not so strong, or in some scenarios or some areas of our life, it's easier for us to see what's wrong than what's strong. And then if you look at biology, then, our defaults is that we evolved by being aware of what's wrong and remembering it more and focusing on it more. And then we have our child experience, and our family dynamics, and then, traumatic situations that lean us to really look at what's wrong. So for many, changing path and going down what's strong, or even considering it at some point, can be quite challenging, because it's about rewriting the narrative and really breaking habits. And when I use this image of a T intersection, where you can go left and you can go right, and if you go left, you're going to go down the path of what's wrong. And as you walk down that path, you get more evidence to support that narrative. But the path that you haven't taken is a what's strong path. And when you do take that path, you begin to get more evidence of what's strong down that path. And anytime you choose left or right, there's always the path you didn't choose. And that's, I see that is that there's a lot of learning from what we're doing, but also what we're not doing.
Yeah. I was talking the other time with the client, and she was talking about how at work, usually all of the communication in terms of, performance, it's all negative. Like, it's what needs to change. And, it's in a sense understandable, if something is not working, to point it out so that it can be changed. If that's the only form of communication, as you're saying, that's going to make it as if, the evidence is that everything is negative, everything is wrong, everything is a weakness, and which means that then the person takes it as if they are not good enough, they are not worthy, they are, like not being able to do that. Whereas perhaps there's a huge percentage of their work that is actually valuable, and, like good performance, yet because the communication might not be there about pointing out that well done, or whatever type of job it was, or a task, if that's not pointed out and only the other thing, there's not even a balance, but also not a recognition. And I think that understanding, that whatever our experiences have been with trauma, and to how we've been exposed to how we see ourselves, having a lot of that negative feedback can reinforce so much, a negative self-view, that it can be really, really harsh for some people. And it's not that, we can't point out things that aren't working. It's just that, as what you're talking, if we're able to see it from what's strong, then we can even change that which isn't working through this lens, and to be able to meet each other as humans as well. Because sometimes, especially at work, a lot of times it might seem as if, like the human element sometimes is not there in a lot of workplaces, and that however we are feeling, that's not in the equation. It's like, well, this needs to get done. It didn't as we wanted to. There's a gap there. Change it.
And for me, there's a real break in my career between working in organizations or institutions or companies that really focused on what's wrong and then focused on what's strong. So before I became a mediator, basically most of my roles focused on my weakness or something that I needed to do to change, or that I wanted to or needed to get a promotion to do that role, that specific role, because where I am, it wasn't enough, or the conversations are like, I need to improve in this area. This is what I'm doing wrong. And then when I became a mediator working in an organization that was really strengths-based, I was continually given evidence of my achievements and what I did well. And I was given, clients who, the manager felt would work well with me because of my characteristics, because of my personality and the way that I work. And I mean, it's not to say that I wasn't told areas of improvement, but there was also this evidence of what was working well. And what really happened with me is there was a massive change in my self-confidence and self-esteem. And so I can see that before I became a mediator, then I was in roles that really supported the what's wrong narrative, but I also did too. And then I kept staying in those roles.
Yeah.
And I kept applying for promotions and wouldn't get them. Right. And then because I was suddenly in this new perspective, then I started to believe it myself, and there's a really massive change in not just my career, but in me personally and my confidence and self-esteem at that point, because that my manager, she really helped me take the path of what's strong for my view of myself. And that was really all that I needed at that point. And it's not to say that you can't do it unless someone shows it to you, but sometimes just having that one role model, or that one, not even a role model, but just someone who saw in me, she saw the strength in me and told me, because, in the past it wasn't so. And so what I realized then happens is when you do have a strong sense of self, then, or it's stronger, you're more resilient, so that when you do get some criticism or adversity, or you're told that you need to improve in there's areas that you could improve in or do differently at work, it's not as heavy.
Yeah. I think that with that, there's an important element, that is that when we have been shown, told, or modeled, as you're saying, and the negative side of things, or what's weak or what's wrong, we believe that's who we are. That's not just, how we are working or how we are doing things. We believe that's who we are. And as you pointed out just now, it's having someone, in a sense, believing in you or modeling you or telling you, and giving yourself the permission to start believing that you have that capability, is what enables one to actually be able to, as you're saying, to go through life from a very different perspective. And I was just like going back last week at university, this class was really, really good. And we were talking about self-images and how people see themselves, and I got them to write, like a majority of the students either couldn't write anything or were writing negative things about themselves. Some of them wrote some positive things. And then at one point I told everybody, just to see how they would experience this. And I told them, you are worthy. You are capable. You are perfect as you are. Just to see, like, how would they take that in? Would they believe it? Would they not believe it? And for many, it was the first time ever that they have even heard that that's something that they could potentially be. And, I think that the more that we're able to get that, to unlearn what we have been taught, consciously or unconsciously, that we have internalized as not being good enough, that makes a huge difference for people. And I think that this approach doesn't negate that there's things to improve, as you're saying. It's a very different thing saying, this needs improvement than you're wrong, this is bad, you're not good enough, this needs to change.
Yeah. And then when you are at when you do have a strong sense of self, and the way that I guess describe a sense of self is how much you believe in yourself. So when your belief in yourself is quite high, when other people give you evidence of reasons not to believe in you or why they don't believe in you, it doesn't have as much an impact. And I guess one other thing that comes up for me in this conversation is that when you haven't had much evidence of what's strong in yourself, and then you start to get it somewhere, it's hard to believe it. And sometimes it doesn't come through, or it takes a lot of continue. And I guess we all know people who are just really negative, and no matter how you try to inject some positivity, it's always flipped and turned around into something negative. And I guess that's the power of this conditioning, the default, the trauma, whether or not it's direct trauma from that individual's experience or even intergenerational trauma. And it's just there. And it can take some time. And I mean, I look at my own journey, and I kind of say, well, look, if I wrote everything down on paper about me, about my life, about the experience that I've had, the studies I've done, and on paper, I look good. But for me at the time, it didn't add up. Like it wasn't the same. It was like I was looking at a different person. So when the strong default is what's wrong, and there's a lot of trauma and there's a lot of conditioning, and the default, and I guess I talk about trauma, but it's really less about the event or a series of an event and more about the impact on the individual. And then, if you have someone who's more sensitive to the outside world, then there might not be an obvious incident. It's just the way that things have been absorbed through them, and a strong what's wrong default or around them. Yeah. Or it might not even be strong, but that's what they're absorbing. And that can also impact that individual to see life through the deficit, like the deficit lens, I call it. So, where there is a significant impact on that individual's quality of life and the way that they view themselves, and that the default is the deficit, the lacking, the weakness, what's wrong, then changing the narrative might really be like 2 steps forward, 10 steps back.
Yeah.
Just a lot slower and harder. It's not impossible. I mean, if you look at people over time who have had massive adversity and gotten through it and become successful in either sharing their story or, however you define success, or just being able to function, whereas other people in their situation would have given up. I think sometimes having those kinds of role models also help us, because you think, oh, gee, they had massive childhood trauma, yet now they've overcome that and they've excelled.
Yeah, I through the years I have run workshops around rewriting one's story, and I keep on telling people all of the time, we are all capable of doing it. For some of us, that process will be longer than for others. And it's not about comparison. It's about understanding. There's so much that we need to unlearn and heal based on our own experience, what came before us. As you pointed out, it's not just whatever we haven't been able to process in this life. Whatever came before with our ancestors has an impact on us, and that creates the lens through which we are seeing and experiencing everything. And if someone has been doing this for the same way of being conditioned, experiencing life through a lens for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, whatever, it's not always, that one day it's all that it's going to take for us
Going
to
on
be
a
like,
retreat or doing a workshop or going to Bali is
yeah.
going to fix it.
It might be, or it might be a catalyst for that,
Yeah.
or it might be a wonderful thing. I keep on telling people a lot of times, like, sometimes there's people that come and do one session with me, and I'm like, wonderful. Hopefully that was great for you in your journey. It is a journey. Like, it's not a one-time fix and that's it. It's not like taking a pill, you're fixed, that's it. We need to understand that there's a lot of conditioning that we need to unlearn. There's a lot of unseen or unfelt experiences that we need to be able to process and heal to be able to function in a different way. Yet, just doing that is already rewriting the story.
Yeah.
Because that as well, I think that it's the rewriting the story is not about the outcome. It's about the approach that we have in each and every single moment, that we are choosing something different than our automatic pilot or our default or whatever it is that we've been conditioned with.
Yeah, that's true. Because I mean, everyone's journey is different and unique and starts differently and ends, or whether or not it ends, but continues. So yeah, I guess it's and I look at it like, if you have an addiction, it's not just about going to rehab. It's more because so many people go to rehab and they come out and then, they relapse. So it's more about that continued impact. And I say it's a multidimensional, because we can read the book, we can do the workshop, we can connect with the resources, but we have to live it. And it's once we can join those dots and live it, multidimensional in all aspects, our thoughts, feelings, actions, everything, I guess that's when we can step forward and stop taking step back, or not as many step backs, we keep going forward.
Or, as I usually say, there's no step forwards, there's no step backs, there's just steps. And
Yeah.
whatever that is, like, they can be on a spiral staircase as well, and
Yeah.
that it seems as if we're going back. There's as well with that, it's like, a beautiful change of perspective. It's like, well,
Yeah.
we're never going back. We're always moving somewhere. And it's just that idea, the same, like, to be able to say, like, oh, I'm going forward as I'm better now, or I'm going back, I'm worst. It's like, well,
Yeah.
no, it's just an exploration. And knowing that on the exploration, it's not a linear path. The exploration is a spiral, or is however we want to talk about it. And to be
Yeah.
able to explore it that way can be really beneficial as well, to take some pressure off ourselves. It's like, I need to be improving whatever I think improving is. It's like, well, can I be kind with myself? This is one of the things that I have found so powerful, working with so many people with so many different perspectives. Like, can I be kind and compassionate with my experience, with someone else's experience, through the lesson of understanding that, like, I'm doing the best that I can. You're doing the best that you can. We're all doing the best that we can. It might not seem as that, but we are. So can we bring some kindness and some compassion and some love into experience to be able to, again, change that narrative?
Yeah. I really like that, actually, that stepping, and yeah, they're just steps, because really the way that I have been using it and describing it and talking about it, it really highlights the what's wrong and what's strong.
Mm.
You know, it can have a step forward or you can have a step back. And that's,
Yeah.
but I guess then it's also about not showing judgment
Mm. Yeah.
because you can have a step in any direction. It's really when we put judgment on it.
Yeah.
Or negative judgment, because it's like, well, okay, I took a step in that direction today. Maybe tomorrow it'll be somewhere else, and that's fine because, it's all going somewhere. It's all movement, moving somewhere.
Mm. Yes. 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 And sometimes we need frameworks to understand things and to be able to understand okay, this was a step back because I reverted back to my old habits instead of the new ones that I'm trying to build. But like I think that whatever is helpful for each person because we're all different and we all need different frameworks to get us to understand how we get there. And the most
Yeah.
important thing, as you just mentioned as well, is we need to live it. We need to experience it. We need to, as I usually say, we need to embody the change because if not, everything is just information. And I keep on telling people, we, there's a lot of information. We can just go online. There's
Mm.
everything. Like online, there's everything of, like how to like be healthy with eating, with meditation, with movement practices, with different therapies, perspectives, with, all of the information is in all of the books, in all of the like online, it's there. It's about how are we living it? How are we experiencing it? How are we embodying it so that then we actually get to really experience it?
Mm. And also, like, if we are aware and we say, well, I took one step back or I took one step, it doesn't matter, I guess, what we label it or how we see it, because if we're reflecting on it and we're going to use that, we're having that conversation. And so that's where I think for people to, I don't want people to think you have to be taking the what's strong path the whole time. No, it's, going back to learning from what's happening and what's not happening, because if we can reflect on the times when we took the what's wrong path and learn from that and be non-judgmental, show that kindness and compassion to ourselves in that process, then what can happen is that the time between us going down what's wrong and having a bit of a reflection time or realization gets smaller and smaller.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's bigger depending on the area of our life, because there are some areas of our life that are just a little bit heavier or a little bit more challenging, and then others that are, a bit quicker. But it's really about the reflective process, which can happen after we've gone down what's wrong,
Hmm.
because then we can use that to help guide our future.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think that, for me at least through the years, and this is one of the things with the different approaches and different like practices of mindfulness meditation, that creating that awareness to be able to reflect and to be able to then decide what I want to do with that and to have, this open awareness of not judging what I've done and to be able to incorporate that as you're saying, it's like, okay, like I did this, whatever this was in this way, or this was my perspective, this was my experience of that. Can I be with that? And that can be immediately afterwards, or it can be later on, years later. It doesn't really matter. It's about understanding how we have that capacity to explore and to reflect and to learn from our own experience and to decide how we want to continue on with that. So yeah, really, really like that. And Rosemary, I'm just aware of our time, and I wanted to ask you a little bit about your book. What led you to write your book, and what some of the things that people can find there?
Yeah. Thanks, Brian. Well, really, it's a sort of marriage of all parts of me, all parts of my life, because it's really based on my observations as a mediator of how people manage adversity, because I noticed that there might be two families with very similar situations, but have very different outcomes. And that's where I overlap that with the strengths-based approach. And I could see tendencies to go towards what's wrong or what's strong that could really determine or impact the outcome. And so it's about, it highlighted the impact of the quality of our thoughts. And so, actually to start, I wrote a story about, it was a story about a woman and her journey and her challenges. And at the end of that book, I wrote one chapter that was a self-help chapter based on her life. As part of my publishing journey, I realized that I needed to make that last chapter into a whole book. And so that's what I did. And I've sort of put in there, my observations, some of the neuroscience and theory on child development and trauma and human behavior, the way our external stimulus, the way we respond to external stimulus and what can impact that. And throughout the book, there's 31 different reflection tasks to help sort of build on. So there'll be one concept introduced, and then the opportunity for readers to then apply that one concept to their life. And then add a little bit more and keep going. And it's a short book, but it can take time to get through, because reading through, doing the task, let it sink in, keep going. Or it's an individual approach. It's really self-paced. So you go at your own pace.
Beautiful.
And it's really, it's a really focus on strengths-based approach. And I propose a tool so that really extends on the categorizing of thoughts, feelings, and actions under what's wrong or what's strong. So I use kind of opposites to help really describe or articulate what that can look like. Whether or not it's showing judgment or showing understanding, or showing criticism or being respectful. So I give these sort of dualities that we can help use to help in that reflective process.
Beautiful. Would you recommend to anyone or a specific type of people experiencing specific type of experiences to read the book and to go through that reflection?
Well, I guess the title is It's Not You, It's Me, A Chronic Overthinker's Guide to Self-Reflection. And so, if you classify yourself as an overthinker, because sometimes when we are on that what's wrong path, we sit there and we stay there and we keep getting more evidence of what's wrong, whereas the what's strong path is more of the self-reflection. So it's about flipping that overthinking into self-reflection and, rewriting that sort of narrative. So anyone who is an overthinker could benefit from that. Anyone who's had a strong upbringing in the what's wrong scenario might also find it helpful.
Yeah. It's interesting because at the moment I'm running a mindfulness course for overthinkers.
Oh, wow.
So,
but mindfulness and meditation is a big part of the process, because it's the training for the brain to make the reflective processes a lot smoother. And I do go through practical tips, and one of them is meditation or mindfulness, and even there's some guided visualizations in there as well. But I guess, when I wrote it, it was really for anyone who had found themselves going through repeat challenges in certain areas of their life, and maybe in other areas they were fine and they were excelling or succeeding, or they didn't have as many challenges as in some, because that was the clue to really start exploring the quality of the thoughts, feelings, and actions around that scenario.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you, Rosemary. For those that are interested either in the book or to learn more about your work, where can they find you?
The best place to go is to my website, rosemarygattuso.com, and I've got all the links to my social media accounts there as well. But I'm on all the usual Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. So
Beautiful. And they can find the book as well there.
everything's there. Yes, thank you.
Beautiful. So if you've been listening or watching us and you resonated with Rosemary and her work, potentially check out the book or any of the work that she's doing. Just reach out. I'll put the links there on the show notes so that it's easy to find. So if there's anything that resonated with you, let us know. If you also have had any experiences with what we've been talking about and you would like to share your insights, your understanding, your experience, just leave us a comment, whatever it is that you're finding this episode to keep the conversation going. So thank you, Rosemary, for taking the time and for sharing this beautiful conversation with me.
Thanks, Brian. It's been great.
And thank you, everyone, for listening, watching us, and can't wait for next time. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
What did you like the most about this episode? Take a moment to think about what change you can make in your life today.
Share your conscious action on social media using #ConsciousAction and tagging @ConsciousActionNZ so we can celebrate your impact on the world and create a ripple effect.
One easy action we would love for you to take right now is to share, like, and subscribe to this podcast. This will help us get these messages out into the world and inspire more people to take conscious action in their own lives, contributing to the better world we hope for.